Recently, CNN reported that the United Nations announced that it would just take 2% of Elon Musk's wealth, $6 billion, to solve world hunger. Guess that's all it takes, $6 billion. What's that? That would take a $20 donation from all 300 million Americans. We could have solved it this whole time. Just a fraction of the United States federal budget. Yet we're blaming those awful billionaires. And I've seen this talking point a lot over the years. It's usually applied to Jeff Bezos. There's even an entire Twitter account dedicated to this hot take called Has Jeff Bezos Decided to End World Hunger? And as you can see, every day they tweet the same thing. Jeff Bezos has decided he will not end world hunger today. This account has over 100,000 followers on Twitter. So thankfully, Elon Musk decided to respond to this. As you can see, Elon Musk responded to this by saying, if the World Food Program, which is a division of the United Nations, if the World Food Program can describe on this Twitter thread exactly how $6 billion will solve world hunger, I will sell Tesla stock right now and do it. And he also added, but it must be open source accounting so the public sees precisely how the money is spent. And the executive director of the World Food Program of the United Nations, and he's been on this crusade for a while now, demonizing people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos for not, just giving a small portion of their wealth to solving world hunger. He responded, as you can see, with this wishy-washy word salad about how, the headline is inaccurate and how it won't actually solve world hunger. And so we really never got the accounting thread that Elon Musk asked for.
No surprise there.
So, so much for all of these hot takes about how Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk are not ending world hunger, as if it was anything more than people trying to package their envy, sneak their envy around under the guise of compassion. You can even see this with America's favorite CEO, Dan Price. He chimed in saying, we know how this is going to end. Elon Musk is going to donate $6 billion to help solve world hunger. Less than 2% of his fortune. He'll write it off and pay $0 in taxes. He'll be named Time Person of the Year as a great philanthropist, while the average family pays a 14% tax rate.
Blow it out your ass.
So as you can see, even ending world hunger is not enough for dorks like Dan Price. But I'm going to be honest. I am actually disappointed. Partly because, after all, it does not take $6 billion to end world hunger. But also because we're not going to get an accounting of an organization like the United Nations, which I think has about an $8 billion annual budget. I think they get about $3 to $4 billion from the United States alone. And I've often wondered, what is this goofy organization spending their $8 billion on? Are they spending it on foreign aid? How much of it are they spending on foreign aid? Or keeping the peace? Or how much are they spending on making dinosaur cartoons? Yeah, you guys might be wondering, dinosaur cartoons? What are they, teaming up with Disney, National Geographic to make educational cartoons about dinosaurs? No, what they're doing is they're animating dinosaurs in videos, as you can see here. They're animating this dinosaur to make it look like he's showing up to the United Nations to warn the world about climate change. Woo! Because apparently Leonardo DiCaprio was not good enough. Apparently, Leonardo DiCaprio did not do a good enough shame job 7 years ago. So apparently they had to get this dinosaur to really drive the point home. Although I actually read that the United Nations, they asked this dumb dinosaur to leave after he made a big deal about how countries like Taiwan and Israel are sovereign nations deserving of international recognition. In all seriousness, I guess this dumb dinosaur did put a scare into the leaders of the world, because last week they all traveled to Scotland. They all traveled to Scotland to talk about the climate emergency. The climate emergency that's apparently caused by burning fossil fuels. The same fossil fuels that go into the planes and the jets that bring these world leaders to the same place in Scotland. The same fossil fuels that go into the tanks of SUVs, as you can see here. The same fossil fuels that go into fleets of security SUVs to shuttle these world leaders around town in Scotland. I mean, look at this. Total clown world, folks, because apparently you can't discuss solutions to climate emergencies on things like Zoom or Skype or FaceTime or Facebook Messenger or AOL Instant Messenger or fax machines or phone calls or text messages or emails or whatever. You know, these world leaders, they want to discuss how they're going to sacrifice your standard of living through higher utility bills, through higher gasoline prices, and meat taxes, and higher prices on food, and taxes to pay for electric vehicle subsidies. Because according to Earth system scientists like Brian C. O'Neill, as you can see right here, he's served as a lead author for several of the intergovernmental panels on climate change reports. He's also been involved with the development of shared socio-economic pathways. So this is a real scientist we can trust. Apparently, he recently said, Brian C. O'Neill, said one thing he wants to make very clear is that all the paths, even the hottest ones, show improvements in human well-being on average. IPCC scientists expect that average life expectancy will continue to rise, that poverty and hunger rates will continue to decline, and that the average incomes will go up in every single plausible future, simply because they always have. Quote, there isn't, you know, like a Mad Max scenario among the SSPs, unquote, O'Neill said. Climate change will ruin individual lives and kill individual people, and it may even drag down rates of improvement in human well-being. But on average, he said, quote, we're generally in the climate change field not talking about futures that are worse than today.
No surprise there.
And apparently this is why we need to bring the Industrial Revolution to a screeching halt. According to Mike Schellenberger's book, Apocalypse Never,
Read a book, read a book, read a motherfucking book. Read a book, read a book, read a motherfucking book.
he was talking about how Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, about how she was saying stuff like the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. And your biggest issue is how we're going to pay for it. Schellenberger mentions how Andrea Dutton, the paleoclimate researcher at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, said, quote, "For some reason, the media latched onto the 12 years, presumably because they thought that it helped to get across the message of how quickly we are approaching this and hence how urgently we need action. Unfortunately, this has led to a complete mischaracterization of what the report said," unquote. Schellenberger says what the IPCC had actually written in its 2018 report and press release was that in order to have a good chance of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius from pre-industrial times, carbon emissions needed to decline 45% by 2030. The IPCC did not say the world would end, nor that civilization would collapse if temperatures rose above 1.5 degrees Celsius. Scientists had a similarly negative reaction to the extreme claims made by Extinction Rebellion. Stanford University atmospheric scientist Ken Caldeira, one of the first scientists to raise alarm about ocean acidification, stressed that, quote, "While many species are threatened with extinction, climate change does not threaten human extinction," unquote. MIT scientist Carrie Emanuel told me, quote, "I don't have much patience for the apocalypse criers. I don't think it's helpful to describe it as an apocalypse," unquote. An AOC spokesperson told Axios, quote, "We can quibble about the phraseology, whether it's existential or cataclysmic," unquote, but he added, "We're losing lots of climate change related problems that are already impacting lives," unquote. But if that's the case, the impact is dwarfed by the 92% decline in decadal death toll from natural disasters since its peak in the 1920s. In that decade, 5.4 million people died from natural disasters. In the 2010s, just 0.4 million people died. Moreover, that decline occurred during a period when the global population nearly quadrupled.
Really makes you think.
And you can also check out my rebuttal video to Second Thought, where I talk about how Dr. Roy Spencer, and other scientists, part of that 97% consensus you often hear about how Roy Spencer said that the fact that the Earth is warming from man-made emissions is innocuous. But this sort of all reminds me of this cartoon that I often see. That says, yes, the planet got destroyed, but for a beautiful moment in time, we created lots of value for shareholders. The irony with this cartoon is that this is what life will look like when you get rid of fossil fuel energy. That's a big reason why climate-related deaths, going back to Schellenberger's point, a point that Alex Epstein talks about a lot, a reason why climate-related deaths are on the decline and have been declining is because of fossil fuels and industrialization. But don't let these scientists, we often hear, trust the science. Don't let these scientists distract you from pictures that show big cities like Washington, D.C. under a bunch of water because sea levels have been rising at an alarming rate, you guys. Have you seen this chart from NASA? Look at the sea level rise since 1900. Look at it just going through the roof at 212 millimeters, which for those in America, that's a whopping roughly 8 inches over the last 120 years. And going back to what Mike Schellenberger pointed out in Apocalypse Never, while global sea levels rose 7.5 inches between 1901 and 2010, the IPCC estimates sea levels will rise as much as 2.2 feet by 2100 in its medium scenario and by 2.7 feet in its highest end scenario. And apparently this is why we need to take marching orders from activists like Greta No Thunberg, who had this to say at the recent rally in Scotland.
Climate conference. This is now a global North greenwash festival. A 2-week-long celebration of business as usual and blah, blah, blah. The most affected people in the most affected areas still remain unheard. And the voices of future generations are drowning in their greenwash and empty words and promises.
Oh no, the voices of future generations are being silenced. Okay, in all seriousness, you know why the voices of future generations are silent? You want to know why? Because future generations don't fucking exist yet.
But the facts do not lie, and we know that our emperors are naked. To stay below the targets set in the Paris Agreement, and thereby minimizing the risk of setting off irreversible chain reactions beyond human control, we need immediate, drastic, annual emission cuts, unlike anything the world has ever seen.
Yeah, we need drastic emissions cuts because, again, if we just keep doing what we're doing now, we're going to see the standards of living rise, poverty and hunger continue to decline, incomes increase. But apparently we need to impoverish the world by cutting emissions. Because that's what's going to happen when you cut emissions, when you cut down energy supply, you're going to get more poverty.
That's just not smart.
And as we don't have the technological solutions that alone will do anything even close to that.
Yeah, we don't have the technical solutions, you guys. Now, I actually made a video on Greta No Thunberg 2 years ago, and it was mainly directed not at Greta, but at the people who kept holding her up as this hero, as this inspiration. When she would say crazy things like, I want you to panic, I want you to be afraid, I don't want to hear your technical solutions. We got to sacrifice the standard. I don't want to hear about the economy or money or jobs. We got to make sacrifices. We got to cut carbon emissions. We got to make sacrifices for future generations. And we're not going to forget your betrayal. You know, a lot of, and I think this is a reason why a lot of people hold Greta up as a hero, because she says a lot of crazy things that people know, that you would think a lot of people want to say, but they don't want to look. So then they hide behind someone like Greta No Thunberg. And if you dare criticize her or any of the crazy things she says, then they tell you, oh, how dare you? How dare you? She's just a kid. How dare you pick on a kid?
Well, excuse me, princess.
And I see Greta really has not changed much. She's now an adult. She's still, talking about, now she's even crazier, blah, blah, blah. We don't have technical solutions. We got to make sacrifices for future generations.
That means we will have to fundamentally change our society.
Got to fundamentally change society, folks.
And this is the uncomfortable result of our leaders' repeated failure to address this crisis.
Now, I can understand her frustration and gripe with world leaders who often, they play into this hysteria, they play into this warmongering, often for more political power, maybe financial gain. You look at someone like Leonardo DiCaprio constantly flying all over the world, wagging his finger, telling everyone how urgent this is, and we gotta do something now. Meanwhile, he throws big parties on big yachts, flies all over the world. We see this with former President Barack Obama, who made a big deal about climate change, and now he recently bought I think a $15 million house on Martha's Vineyard. And for those who are not geography experts out there, Martha's Vineyard is an island off the East Coast, So, that big $15 million house he bought, it's probably rather vulnerable to the sea level rise we got to prevent. Yeah, people in the middle of Kansas and Oklahoma and Montana and whatnot, that apparently they got to pay like $22 for a gallon of gasoline so that Barack Obama and his precious multi-million-dollar house in Martha's Vineyard doesn't have to get threatened with sea level rise.
Oh, you absolutely suck!
And the climate and ecological crisis, of course, doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is directly tied to other crises and injustices that date back to colonialism and beyond. Crises based on the idea that some people are worth more than others.
So Greta doesn't like the notion that some people are worth more than others.
And therefore had the right to steal others, to exploit others, and to steal their land and resources.
Yeah, I find this interesting because she's essentially arguing that future generations are worth more than current generations, and all this talk about resources, she essentially wants to take away your resources like fossil fuel energy that make your life better and make it easier for people like you to survive.
Oh, you absolutely suck!
And last night, Bill Maher did a segment, one of his new rule segments, where he presents millennials and Zoomers with the option of being Team Greta No Thunberg or Team Kylie Jenner, going as far to note how things like smartphone usage and food delivery services and cryptocurrency and jet flying, these are all contributors to climate change. Saying that you can either be team consumption, convenience, and luxury, or team saving the planet, but you cannot be both. I think where Maher is mistaken is the framing, especially when you consider that a lot of this warmongering is incredibly overblown. It should really be framed as team flourishing versus team sacrifice. Where Maher is correct is the fact that you cannot be both.